You know, I think the more we regulate, the more appealing it becomes to become a cyber criminal, because only law-abiding citizens will have to be bound by all that, which is really important for those people. But you know, for criminals, they don't really care about that. So I'd like to talk a bit about security today. My name is Kirils Solovjovs, and I work at a small Latvian company called Possible Security. We do hacking and fixing what we have hacked. My background is in live network forensics. I love DNS. I've loved since I learned that DNS exists back on UDP port of 53. I also do some social engineering, and I keep breaking stuff. I keep breaking different technical things. I keep breaking different cybersecurity policies and regulations. EU still hasn't fixed electronically signed documents. I mean, we reported it a couple years ago. We were in the discussions, and you know, it was decided that it's too hard, too much of a work to fix, because policymakers have to work together with technical specialists. But still, we're here today to talk about DNS, and I'm a security expert. But today, just for the presentation, I want to be your in-security expert. I want to talk only and solely about DNS insecurity, which is not how I usually do it, but I hope at the end we will have some time for questions and discussions on how to fix that, or how some of the things have been fixed. So currently there are many ways you can use DNS inappropriately, how you can attack DNS, and how you can use DNS to attack other systems. Now, of course, we do not have the time today to talk about all the attacks and all the vulnerabilities that have been there. But I've collected some of the more interesting ones, more popular ones, and some newer ones as well. I divided them into 3 categories. Architectural vulnerabilities, so the ones that are there because of bad design. Someone somewhere decided that is the way it should be, and that's what we're stuck with. And you know, DNS is more than 40 years old, and it makes sense that security was not part of the DNS design. Then we have implementation weaknesses, which is, you know, the standards are good, but these are programmers, system architects, or maybe system administrators, or even CISOs have made the wrong decision. And then we have human errors, where users, or attackers, or maybe someone in between, has done it incorrectly. Now, to make it a bit easier on those of you who are not that technical, I've designed a small concept that will be on every vulnerability slide. I call it the CIA pyramid. You can see it on the screen there. Now, on the left side of the pyramid, I will pin a pin indicating how much does the problem affect DNS itself. If it's exploited or if it happens, what's the effect on the DNS? So, for example, if there's a huge effect on confidentiality, this screen doesn't work that way. If there's a huge effect on the confidentiality, then, and that's it, and just the DNS, then the pin will be right over here in the middle, here. And on the other side of the pyramid, there are the other systems. So when the scope gets changed during the attack. Right, let's go ahead. And we'll go real quick without technical infos, and you know, you can just take the keywords from the title, write it down, and Google it later if you're interested. Many of the attacks are as old as DNS. Some of them are. So, architectural. Of course, we have the popular one, DNS reflection and amplification. So, since we do not have a 3-way handshake in UDP on the third level, that basically means that we can spoof the source address. And if we spoof the source address, we get replies sent to the victim. And DNS is also real nice in amplification. The query is almost always shorter than the response, which means it's really nice for an attack and for DDoS and for extorting some money out of some customer somewhere. Cyber criminal customer, of course. Then the second one here is DNS spoofing, also known as cache poisoning. And of course, the most advanced version of it is the Kaminsky attack, God rest his soul. And the interesting part here is that, you know, recently it has been discovered, attention has been drawn to the fact that, of course, this technique can be used against systems that are sending emails on demand. What is the most popular system that sends emails on demand when user requests an email? It's the forget password feature of any site. So you do the cache poisoning attack, you click forget password, and bam, it's your MX record. You as attacker have the recovery link. Really cool stuff. Then, of course, there's the possibility to do distributed denial of service attacks on the root name servers. Since I learned about DNS back in before 2000, I think, right? I was just learning about how network works and administrating stuff. I looked at the concept and I thought, there are these, I think, 13 servers back in the day, and that's it. Like, you know, internet is decentralized, but DNS is basically centralized. It has to be, as we'll see later. So I had a theoretical idea, and I always try to find the theoretical vulnerabilities that may pan out to be practical in the end. What would happen if someone, you know, unplugged the 13 servers? And I thought, oh, it's going to be terrible. Well, hackers tried it a couple times. Nothing happened. There is caching, there is resilience, there are defenses. I think we're good. It's a really theoretical attack, so that's why there's no impact on anything here. Then we have possibility of root conflicts with alternative routes, alternative DNS routes. So there have been people, you know, like me, growing up, little children, thinking, why the hell do we need to pay for DNS? You know, internet should be free, right? So the solution was alternative DNS, of course. Well, there's the problem. It's an appealing idea if you're a 18-year-old hippie, but you know, if you wanna run an internet bank, then it's really not what you want. There's even an RFC on alternative DNS routes, 2826, that specifies that's not something that you should do. It's really a short one. You can read it in 3 minutes if you're interested. Then we, of course, have Web3 domains. And once again, the most interesting part here, I think, will be the possible root conflicts. Right? So this is from Unstoppable Domains. It's a screenshot. They you know, compare. And so currently, as you can see on the second line, browser compatibility. Only the traditional so-called Web 2 domains, as I call them, are browsers compatible, which in layman's terms means if you type Web 3 domain in any browser, it doesn't work. And they have an asterisk there, and it says on the bottom that they hope it will work after ICANN approves it. Well, good luck. Then we have passive DNS. Passive DNS is a really, really cool feature. So basically, it works in a way that there are sensors around the world, not on authoritative name servers, rather nearby or on the recursive name servers, and they monitor and record what users request. And then, as a security researcher or an attacker, you can do requests to that database. Here's an example of example.com. I requested A and NS record history for that error name. And here we are. So what we can see here is that I have data here since this passive DNS was launched in 2010. And what would it mean? It would mean if, let's say, well, the IP addresses have not changed much. I believe the IP addresses themselves are also part of the designated example IPv4 network. But let's say we decide to move example.com tomorrow to Cloudflare. We put it on a new address, yeah, and you know, now hackers can't DDoS it. Well, you go here, you look at the old IP address, and that's what you usually DDoS. So the good advice, of course, here is to move your actual host subnet somewhere else after you do the DDoS protection thingy. Well, there are problems with DNS security. So DNS security was introduced, DNSSEC. And DNSSEC basically allows us to sign and prove that DNS contents are valid. It should have solved everything. Well, and one of the technical things that had to be implemented for DNSSEC to work was the NSEC record. And NSEC record basically, if you have, let's say, if you have a subdomain of a signed DNS zone, then using the NSEC record, you can see where the alphabetically next subdomain is. So it's super easy to enumerate all your zone using the NSEC record. So that didn't work too well. NSEC 3 came along. It hashes and encrypts stuff. So here's a screenshot of a cool tool called DNSSEC Zone Enumerator. Yes, you need a GeForce card or maybe a couple cards or some cloud computing, but it's still really, really doable. NSEC3 is salted, though, so it took all the best of what we had at hashing things at that point in time and implemented it. Then we have certificate transparency. We've had it for not that long, for 10 years, I think. I mean, everything was good, right? We had these certificate authorities who were signing publicly reliable and publicly verifiable certificates for different companies that wanted. And then, of course, some people decided that it's a good way to try and create fake certificates. You know, you can bribe them, you can try to coerce them. Certificate Authority 3 back in the day, more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was really, you know, it was amazing because CA could technically sign a sub-CA that could sign any certificate in the world. So we had, I believe, a library in North Korea being able, as a CA, being able to sign any certificate. We had a municipality in Russia being able to sign any certificates. And we tried to fix it with HTTP public key pinning, which I believe is a great idea because I believe people shouldn't make mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, HPKP is amazing. Unfortunately, people make mistakes. So what you can do is, what you could do when it was a standard, when it was an active standard, was that you could basically say, these are my certificates and only these are my certificates. And if you lost them, then you're done. Then for a year or 2 years, or whatever you specified, your HTTPS is not working anywhere, and there is no way in the world to revert it. So that was killed, and certificate transparency was there to solve it all. Well, certificate transparency is fun stuff, so that basically allows us to take a look at all HTTPS or all TLS certificates that have been put out, signed for a specific domain and subdomains as well. Here's once again, for example, com. One of the oldest ones. It's really fun. So common name was hosted jivesoftware.com apparently for that domain at the very beginning. Really interesting. Or rather, no, that's the. It's probably matched because of the matching identities, because of the email address. Never mind. But still, you can see the older domains right there. Then we have dangerous global TLDs. We have .zip now for some, I don't know what reason. We have .mov. Ms. Sataki asked about what we're going to have next. I think we should have .localhost or maybe .1. Those could be good GTLDs, you know. And of course, as you can see in the screenshot, it breaks stuff. Now they fixed it, but it has the potential to break things, and I really don't like it. I've actually had it happen in my command line as well in the terminal. Okay, now that was the longest part. Now implementation weaknesses. Let's look at those. So we can do authorized zone transfer, of course. Who can request it? Usually your slave server. So the master does a notify, slave server does a request, and all the zone gets transferred. Well, it's mainly IP-based. You can do some magical security. You can, well, not magical. You can do actual security. You can also do private networks for authorized zone transfer. Basically, it's IP-based. Luckily, it's 99.9% TCP. Which means we're safe unless you misconfigure your zone. Now, before it was the good practice for TLDs to publish their zones. Even TLDs had this vulnerability. They just, you know, oh, we misconfigured. Everyone can do AXFR. Now, that got fixed when there were researchers running AXFR on all the TLDs like every second. So as soon as you make a mistake, they dump it and they publish it. So that we haven't seen this for a couple of years now. DNS tunneling, it doesn't affect DNS itself, as you can see, but it can be used to exfiltrate data from private networks, corporate networks, or it can be used as a CNC channel. DNS rebinding. This is basically a type of timing attack. So when you do the check or the request is sent, you reply with the public IP address, but then when the second request is sent, you quickly change the reply to a local IP address. And that way, it works in tandem with how modern browsers work, checking the origin, and it would allow your script to access local servers and local network. Really fun stuff as well. Browsers are doing things to combat that, but it's still possible, of course. Now, in 2021, Tamari and Lutvak wrote about exposure via DNS as a service. So basically, for managed DNS, like Route 53, for example, if you register specific domain names, it breaks their whole system. So in layman's terms, the separation between different customers in this virtualization environment as it applies to DNS was not performed correctly. And it's still possibly an issue with some smaller providers that have not fixed that. Finally, human errors. Typo squatting. Yeah, right. We just register misspelled domain names and we hope that a human will type it wrongly. Under this, there's also, of course, the ideograph attacks where we use UTF symbols to try and register similar-looking domain names. Drop catching. We can re-register a freshly expired domain name. Here's a screenshot from a post by Mr. Ved. He was able to buy Google.com from the Google DNS registry for $12. It worked out for about 1 minute, and then Google just took it away, refunded the money, and gave, I think, 1.4 thousand euros on top of that. Really cool. We also did a presentation on drop catching Latvian domain names about 5 or 6 years ago, I believe, at this very conference. You can look it up at Kirils.org if you're interested in that. Now, then you can use also classical domain hijacking or takeovers, right? We can try to abuse bugs in registrars and try to work around that. Katrina knows we've tried some tests like 10 years ago, trying to pretend to be someone else, but NCC-LV is quite good in that regard, you know. On the other hand, registrant's credentials can be compromised as well, and you can try to log in that way and steal the domain that way, register it to someone else. Now, name server reclamation is an interesting one, and it's a real thing that's happening to me. Because I've been running my own server, my own set of DNS servers for almost as long as I've been running my own email, so much more than 20 years. Here's a scenario. So you buy a domain and you delegate your domain name to a trusted party. Let's call it Zeta. And so the trusted party configures and it hosts all your records. You know, that it's on there. Then decades pass. And decades later, domain changes ownership, or maybe management decides, okay, so we wanna do our own domain management. And what they do, they go to, for example, NCC-LV, they delete DNS records, create new DNS records, or just add A records directly on the top level. Now, Zeta is not informed of this and does not destroy the zone. And what has happened in my case multiple times, and unfortunately I only noticed it like a year or 2 years later, is that users that are using my authoritative and slave name servers as recursive servers are provided stale responses potentially forever. It can be used by malicious actors and it can be used by benevolent actors like me unintentionally as well. And finally, of course, since we do have DNSSEC, it is possible to lose DNSSEC root keys. Well, maybe. I mean, there are lots of people involved. There are lots of backups. Has never happened. Will probably never happen. But you know, if the right 30 or 40 people die, then we might have a problem. So these are the vulnerabilities I talked about briefly. And you know, if there are any questions or comments on what I discussed here today, you're really welcome. Yes, please.